All right. First rule of this channel, we do not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So I was kind of hoping that more substantial news would drop so I didn't have to do these two things together, but I've been thinking about them for the last couple of days. So content for the content gods. So Jerry Jeudy signed a contract extension with his new team, the Browns. And then we have D'Onta Foreman. He signed with the Browns. There's no contact detail or contract details that I can find so far. Talk a little bit about the Jerry Jeudy thing first. Is a little less to talk about with D'Onta Foreman. There's a lot more to talk about with Jerry Jeudy. His deal is 3 years, $58 million. So that that's going to be like the ballpark of $18 million a year, more or less. And then 41 million of that is guaranteed. It looks like he's signed until 2028. The big issue behind this is Amari Cooper is going to hit 30 in June. He's going to be over that age apex. So we can already start looking for a decline just off of age based off of Amari Cooper, even if we don't like the situation where Jeudy's going or we don't like him as a player. I remember when he's at Alabama, the knock on him while he was at Alabama before he left is that he was always already polished to the point uh that his physical limitations were always going to get in the way of what he could do at the next level. So again, like as a prospect, I don't care. That's not what we're doing in fantasy football. Fantasy football is mostly numbers. So anyway, there is the possibility that Amari Cooper is, or I shouldn't say the possibility. The tea leaves are saying Amari Cooper is going to take a step back in production overall, and the Browns have just signed his replacement right now in the ballpark of I wouldn't say high end wide receiver two money. It is towards the higher end of that market, but it is not necessarily like high end. Remember, Mike Williams signed $15 million contract for 1 year. The benchmark still is probably that Christian Kirk deal a couple years ago, about $20 million, and then Tyreek Hill's at 30. So it kind of gives you an indication of what they think, what he thinks that he's going to be doing with that the next 3 years at that deal. If he was going to bet on himself to be towards that $30 million a year range, he wouldn't have signed the deal. He did. So this is kind of mutually beneficial between the Browns and Jerry Jeudy. They may get a wide receiver one. He doesn't have to take the risk that he's going to, show that he's limited as a player. So from a fantasy perspective, that's not actually what we care about. What we care about is value that we're spending on him, capital that we're spending on him in the draft relative to the range of outcomes that we could get from the player. So right now, this is early on with ESPN. Jerry Jeudy is, I've looked at him. Somebody else had him as wide receiver 47. This one has him as wide receiver 55 overall, 130. So like some of your drafts, he'd be in that like what round 13, round 12 type range, which is like really undervalued. And when you start looking at some of the other players that they have ranked just on this list, and again, this doesn't matter. This is just a subjective ranking. Guys like Demario Douglas for the Patriots. These are the guys that popped off at me. Demario Douglas for the Patriots and Rashid Shaheed for the Saints. Neither of these guys have a good road to finish as a wide receiver one in fantasy, let alone the fact that both of these guys don't look like they will finish as either the number one target guy in their offense or the wide receiver one within their offense. Demario Douglas maybe, but that's we don't really know what's going on with that offense at this point. So like a guy like Jerry Jeudy, the tea leaves say that the number one in that offense is going to take it a step back because of age. They just signed him to essentially take over for that role in the future, and you're going to be paying the price outside of that range of outcomes for him to be nothing. So again, if I can spend, pick 130 on a guy to be nothing and find out that he's not even a wide receiver three, then that's a risk that I'm willing to take. So that's just something with Jerry Jeudy that I'd be looking at, monitoring where this draft, where his uh, average ADP is going to end up going into the draft season. So like I could definitely see that as long as Jerry Jeudy is outside of the seventh round, there's going to be potential for return on the pick moving forward. And again, and I have this pointed out, like what we're looking for from a fantasy perspective when we're drafting guys is we want to be in this roughly 150 target range. That's what we're looking for. So like once we get outside that 150 target range, we drop precipitously into that wide receiver three type range. So there's only going to be like a handful of guys that are in that wide receiver two range. Those guys still have value from a fantasy perspective, but like I don't want to be drafting a lot of guys that are already capped as wide receiver twos unless I'm drafting him with wide receiver 3 capital. It is the same thing. If I'm drafting a wide receiver 2, I want them to have a wide receiver 1 range of outcomes. So again, with a guy like Jerry Jeudy, where he's not even being drafted as a wide receiver 3, and he has a wide receiver 1 range of outcomes, that's somebody I'm already looking to target in a draft, because at that pick 130 in less competitive leagues, he might not even be drafted at this point. Obviously, this is March. A lot of things are going to change between now and when most of your more competitive drafts take place, like towards the end of August, beginning of September. All right. So the other guy to talk about is D'Onta Foreman signing with Cleveland. This one's kind of really interesting. Similar to the Alexander Madison and Rico Dowdle sliders that we just talked about the other day. So with D'Onta Foreman, it says $2 million up there. Don't pay attention to that. I couldn't find any contract details for Foreman. Some of it's going to be how much guaranteed money there is in the deal. Again, this could just be relative insurance towards Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, like I would be surprised if he even plays this year based off of how severe the injury was. And if he comes back, it's probably going to be later in the season. There's going to be some type of probably transitional phase with him, and he may not be ever Nick Chubb again. So, and I think he's already over the the running back age apex to begin with, let alone the injury. That's not what we're talking about when it comes to D'Onta Foreman. What we're talking about is like what his range of outcomes are going to be. So unless they cut Ford or Pierre Strong, because he would be moving into the role that Kareem Hunt had last year. He's going to be that 2 down type banger, limited opportunities, goal line type guy, fringe RB2, RB3 type of range. That's what his range of outcomes would look to be. So unless there's another running back movement, they get rid of Strong, there's an injury to Ford, something along those lines. But what it tells me from the backfield situation for Cleveland is they don't like any of their guys. Like, why would you bring a guy in like D'Onta Foreman relative to just taking a swing in the draft? Again, this is another thing with the draft. They don't think that they're going to be spending draft capital on a guy, or they're hedging their bets towards not being able to get a guy that can contribute right away. There's a lot of really interesting things when it comes down to how much I want to be touching this backfield in the first place. And the longer he's there, the murkier it makes the backfield. And 2 guys, I can buy a backfield. 3 guys, I don't know how it's going to shake out. 4 guys, like which would be happening when Nick Chubb comes back, is just something I probably want to end up avoiding. There's not going to be any consistency. So with your running back 3s and your wide receiver 3s, like outside of just dart throws where I get lucky in a week and there's no predictability to it, it becomes very difficult to find out where they shake out. So a guy like D'Onta Foreman, maybe he doesn't make the roster. Maybe he's inactive on game days. All the things that I would be factoring in, and it becomes very difficult based off of how they used Jerome Ford last year. They didn't like running in between the tackles. He was kind of this like hybrid receiving back that got like some run in the running game. D'Onta Foreman is just going to be a downhill back. He's not going to be in the passing game. And he's not going to do special teams. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that shakes out during the offseason. And the other thing is, if he went to Cleveland from a, hey, I need someplace to play, there may have been other places that either gave him more money with less of an opportunity of playing time, or Cleveland gave him the best opportunity for playing time, but didn't give him the most money. So again, what his deal is going to be in the ranges, it is probably going to be like $1 or $2 million for him to come in and compete for something. Like, I don't even know if there's a roster spot that would be available to him right off the bat, like maybe early in the season with Nick Chubb. And it just makes it really difficult to properly evaluate the guys. And this would be the situation where, like, I would probably be taking the entire backfield off my board because I can't properly evaluate them. I don't think there's enough possibility of an upside play, a league winning play to take a guy like this based off the available information that there is out there. So that means a guy like Jerome Ford, based off this signing, like kind of, I'm less inclined to want a Jerome Ford trying to parse out how the backfield is going to shake up. If they didn't sign D'Onta Foreman, that means that they would feel pretty good about rolling Jerome Ford until Nick Chubb potentially could come back. But since they signed D'Onta Foreman and he could go into that Kareem Hunt role, like, I'm just not interested. If they trusted Pierre Strong enough to take over that role while they waited for Nick Chubb, why would they make the signing? it just becomes very odd. And obviously the draft can shake this up a little bit more. So anyway, those are just my general thoughts. And if something comes up or something else strikes my fancy, then I'll get another one out there.